Okay, picture this. What actually happens when you kick an absolute musical genius out of what is destined to become the biggest metal band on the planet? Well, you don't just get a little footnote in a history book. No, you get a massive 40-year feud that literally reshaped heavy metal. Today, in this explainer, we're taking a close look at the explosive and highly volatile relationship between two absolute titans of thrash.
Welcome to this explainer. Today, we're taking a completely impartial, fact-based deep dive into the historic rivalry between Metallica and Megadeth. We're going to look at the data, the timelines, and the music itself to cut through all the rumors and endless fanboy arguments. Let's find out what actually happened and why this metal civil war is absolutely crucial to anyone who loves music.
Section 1. The Metal Civil War Begins. A Volatile Origin Story. Okay, let's dive right into this by looking at how incredibly fast everything came together and then violently fell apart for these young musicians.
The origins here are just rapid fire. In 1981, teenagers James Hetfield and Lars Ulrich found Metallica. Fast forward to 1982, they put out an ad for a lead guitarist. A 20-year-old Dave Mustaine answers, plugs in to warm up, and get this, he's hired practically on the spot. He brought this blistering, raw energy and wrote tracks like the incredibly fast Mechanics. He was literally the missing puzzle piece the band desperately needed. But then, just a year later in 1983, Mustaine is unexpectedly fired. Out of pure spite, he immediately forms his own band, Megadeth.
So what actually caused this sudden split? Well, looking at the sources, it wasn't about musical ability at all. It was honestly about survival. Now, the early Bay Area thrash scene was already notorious for heavy drinking. I mean, the band literally earned the nickname Alcoholica. But Mustaine's behavior escalated a bit differently. According to band history, when he drank, he became dangerously violent, getting into blackout-inducing physical altercations. He'd even try using martial arts moves on people, like this mythical 5 points palm-exploding heart technique. The absolute breaking point, though, seemed to be a terrifying incident where Mustaine was driving the band's U-Haul on black ice in Wyoming to record their debut album and crashed. At that point, he had simply become a dangerous liability. The dismissal itself? Completely unceremonious. On a cold April morning in New York, the rest of the band woke him up, literally handed him a bus ticket back to California, and that was that. As Mustaine famously recalled, he had no warning, no second chance. Basically, when they told him to leave, he packed in about 20 seconds and he was gone. That single, brutal morning was the inciting incident for a grudge that would last 40 years. Imagine pouring your blood, sweat, and tears into a project only to be shoved onto a cross-country bus while your replacement flies in that exact same day. Naturally, this bitterness bled straight into the music. Mustaine specifically told them not to use his music, but, Metallica had an album to record. Look at the difference here. Megadeth's version of his song Mechanics is fast, raw, high energy with original lyrics by Mustaine. Now, on the other hand, Metallica's version was rebranded as The Four Horsemen. They took Mustaine's blistering riff, slowed the tempo way down, changed the lyrics, and new guitarist Kirk Hammett even added a bridge inspired by Lynyrd Skynyrd's Sweet Home Alabama. This one single demo track being utilized by both bands sparked decades of fierce accusations over stolen riffs.
Moving on to Section 2, Head-to-Head, the musicians, comparing the titans of thrash. Let's step back from all the drama for a second and look objectively at the talent on both sides of this battlefield.
Starting with the lead guitars, Dave Mustaine is for sure an absolute freak of nature on the instrument. He brought R&B influences into metal, used totally weird tempos, and his rhythm playing is just incredibly complex and frantic. Now, Kirk Hammett, who took his spot in Metallica, took a completely different approach. Hammett leans heavily into a pentatonic style, and his true genius, it's perfectly playing to the emotion of the song. Take his legendary solo on Fade to Black as a prime example. He just excels at elevating the emotional core of Metallica's massive anthems. And this brilliantly illustrates how different their vocal approaches are too. Mustaine has this highly unique, kind of irritating edge to his voice. But honestly, it perfectly fits the frantic, cynical energy of Megadeth. James Hetfield, on the other hand, is generally much stronger at actually carrying a tune, later adopting that infamous 90s croon that totally catapulted Metallica to mainstream radio success. Look, neither is a traditional, classically trained vocalist, but each voice perfectly serves its respective band's sonic identity. When we look at the rhythm sections, we see two entirely different philosophies. Megadeth frequently utilized absolute technical masters,
We're talking guys like early drummers Gar Samuelson and Nick Menza, who played with this jazz-like machine gun precision, anchored by bassist David Ellefson, basically the steady Robin to Dave's Batman. Meanwhile, Metallica's rhythm section was less about pure technical jazz precision and much more about sweeping compositional genius. The looming, eclectic influence of bassist Cliff Burton, combined with drummer Lars Ulrich's totally unique swing and song-arranging mastery, gave Metallica a wildly distinct architectural sound. That brings us to Section 3, Myths, Music, and Masterpieces. Fact-checking the rivalry. With those musical profiles in mind, it's time to shift this explainer into myth-busting mode, to address those decades-long arguments over stolen music and accusations of selling out. Now, what's really interesting here is that we can finally address the absolute biggest myths of all. The idea that Dave Mustaine single-handedly wrote all of early Metallica. People literally still argue this today. So let's look at the actual hard data. Here is the reality check. On Metallica's groundbreaking first 3 albums, which total 26 tracks, Dave Mustaine is credited as a co-writer on exactly 6 of them. Just 6. And it's absolutely crucial to note that prefix, co-writer. Metallica willingly gave him credit where it was legally and musically due, proving they weren't trying to erase him from history. But the data clearly, definitively dispels the myth that he wrote their entire early catalog. Furthermore, if you look at the essential massive hits that made Metallica globally famous, Mustaine actually has 0 writing contributions on them. Hit the Lights, the original version of that actually predates him joining the band. Then you've got Seek and Destroy, For Whom the Bell Tolls, Creeping Death, and the masterful ballad Fade to Black. None of these iconic, stadium-filling tracks have Mustaine's fingerprints on them. Now, despite this intense rivalry, both bands bizarrely mirrored each other's career trajectories over the decades. In the 80s, both delivered classic, unbridled thrash masterpieces. Then, in the 90s, they both pivoted to highly commercial, slower metal with the Black Album and Countdown to Extinction. And by the late 90s, they both experimented with heavily criticized alt-rock phases. It's kind of funny. If one band was accused of selling out for radio play, the exact same charge could objectively be leveled right back at the other. There are also persistent and, frankly, ridiculous plagiarism myths on both sides of the fence. Some folks claim Metallica's massive hit Enter Sandman ripped off a smaller band called Excel. Others claim Metallica stole from Megadeth's Go to Hell because both songs feature the Now I Lay Me Down to Sleep prayer. But here's the catch. Go to Hell came out just 20 days before Enter Sandman. The reality is, overlapping musical cliches happen totally naturally in a genre that only uses 12 notes. These aren't malicious thefts, they're literally just common heavy metal building blocks. One area where they distinctly differ, however, is their total output. Megadeth has consistently pumped out records, hitting about 25 distinct album releases depending on how you count EPs and live sets. Metallica, on the other hand, has an output of roughly 18. Mustaine kept his band working at a blistering pace through lineup changes and shifting trends, while Metallica took much longer, highly calculated gaps between their massive global releases. Let's move to Section 4, Ending the Civil War. Reconciliation and the Big Four. Let's see how this all builds to a resolution. After decades of public mudslinging, how does a massive historical conflict like this actually end? Well, it happened slowly and then all at once. In 2004, a major thought occurred when Dave and Lars sat down for an incredibly tense on-camera therapy session in the documentary Some Kind of Monster. By 2010, the unbelievable happened. Metallica actually invited Megadeth to join them on the historic Big Four tour. Then, in 2011, Dave played on stage at Metallica's 30th anniversary shows in San Francisco. And finally, in 2012, Mustaine officially and publicly apologized to James Hetfield for his unpredictable behavior back in the 1980s. Mustaine later reflected on this reconciliation with genuine warmth, saying, "I think we forgave each other rather quickly. Me and him have actually gotten a kind of a cool phone thing. I have a kind of a pure thing going." After all the anger, the media jabs, and the hurt feelings, it ultimately just came down to older guys letting go of the past and finding a profound mutual respect. So the crucial point is this: what seemed like a complete tragedy for young Dave Mustaine actually became the greatest possible outcome for heavy metal fans everywhere. Because of that one harsh, fateful morning decision in New York back in 1983, the world got 2 legendary, distinct, and world-conquering metal bands instead of just one. The friction created fire, and that fire forged 2 incredible discographies. It really makes you wonder, doesn't it? Imagine an alternate reality where Dave Mustaine got sober in 1983 and stayed in Metallica. What would that superband have sounded like? And without the venom and spite that totally fueled Megadeth, what incredible, blistering music would we have missed out on entirely? It's a fascinating piece of music history to think about. Thank you so much for joining me on this explainer, and keep exploring the history behind the music you love.